Hi, I'm Matt Archer. I'm with Aporia magazine, and we are in Berkeley, California, at the world's most important conference on intelligence. And we wanted to ask the world's leading researchers two questions.
That's easy. This was Bernard Williams, who was the professor of philosophy at Cambridge when I was an undergraduate. And he was the most fluent talker I have ever met. He would have office hours where 20 people would come every week just to hear him discuss whatever he wanted to discuss.
Is there a particular anecdote that you recall where his intelligence shines and doesn't?
I thought the funniest anecdote about him was that one of my fellow undergraduates brought their grandparents to hear him. And that day he decided he would spend the 2 hours discussing free will. And at the end, they said they were really impressed that he pretended not to know the answer in order to encourage the undergraduates.
I don't know the guy's name. In 2008, I gave a talk at SAC Capital, a hedge fund, and there was a quantitative analyst there where I was giving the talk, and he was anticipating what I was saying without being a geneticist. And it was really weird, and talking to him, you could tell that he was always many steps ahead of everybody else. If you want to give me a name, I'll say Nick Patterson at the Broad Institute, who also comes out of quantitative finance. Probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, yeah. But I mean, a lot of people in quantitative finance are very, very smart, fast.
I've written two books in recent years. One's called At Our Wits' End, Why We Become Less Intelligent, What Leads to the Future. And the other's called The Past, the Future Country, the Coming Conservative Revolution. I had co-authors on it, and I would say those two. One is Michael Woodley of Manille, he's over there, and the second is a chap called J.O.A. Rayner Hills. One of the two is the smartest person I've ever met. I'm not sure which. One of the two. If I had to plump for it, I'd say Rayner Hills.
And what is it about him? Do you have an anecdote where he dazzled you with his intellect? That's a difficult one. Well, I do. For example, we were talking with one of these two about the witch craze. And he came up with this idea that what witches were going through when they said that the devil had entered them and the devil had appeared to them in the form of a black man, had sex with them, and these were basically rape fantasies. And I thought that was such a fascinating connection. And there are many, many other connections of that kind that perhaps don't occur to me as readily, that this person has incredible and most unlikely connections that I would never have thought of, between two utterly disparate things that completely make sense that this person made. And so that would be one example that sticks with me.
Andrew Sullivan, he's a journalist. He's just an amazing writer and a very deep thinker, and has a encyclopedic knowledge of world history.
Is there any anecdote about Andrew where he demonstrated his intelligence and wowed you?
In his writing capabilities. So he could just churn out an article for the London Times in an afternoon.
Like Christopher Hitchens?
Yes, he's very much like Christopher Hitchens, yeah.
It's not somebody you've ever heard of. It's a guy called Ken Hughes, mathematician, polymath, who was far smarter than anyone else I've ever met. Certainly far smarter than I am, but wrong about many things.
Is there an anecdote where he demonstrated his intelligence and you thought, okay, wow, that's just something different?
He could lecture on any topic in mathematics with no notes. He would simply just start writing. So what stronger demonstration could you have of someone's competence? He could lecture on Egyptology. He could lecture on economics, English literature, history, you name it. But he's completely wrong about IQ.
I don't want to say who's the smartest person I've ever met personally, because if I say, that might get some people peeved, but I will tell you someone who I think is underrated. This is my friend, the physicist Gregory Cochrane. Most broadly knowledgeable person I know. One thing I value is being able to predict what's going to happen in the future quickly without needing to ponder a lot. And I've just been very impressed with Greg's record over the years in that domain. predicting that there would be no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, how COVID would unfold, how the current conflict in Ukraine would unfold. Often what he said was very contrary to what others were saying, but he's consistently been right, and that's something that impresses me greatly.
I had the pleasure to sit, well, I was asked who I wanted to sit next to at a banquet that we had of advisors for this institute I worked for in Albuquerque, and John Nash was going to be at this dinner, and of course I decided to sit next to John Nash, and it was an interesting evening. He was elderly at the time and not super talkative, but the brilliance still emanated from him, and I was extremely gratified to have the opportunity to sit next to him and pick his brain a little bit.
What did you speak about?
Not game theory or anything like that, or economics. We talked about his life and where he came from, and more mundane things. It was quite interesting. I didn't want to press him on the world of ideas, but just to talk to him about his life and how he found Albuquerque and what he thought about the research that we were doing, the neuroimaging research and the prospects. We were looking at schizophrenia and talking to him about the prospects of if we would be able to crack this intractable disease was quite fascinating.
What did you think?
He didn't really have an opinion about that. He doesn't know much about scientific diseases and disorders. I thought it was particularly interesting because he's had some certainly mental illness challenges himself. So I really wanted to get his perspective. He's chosen not to use medication to treat his illness, which is de rigueur for psychiatrists. So I really wanted to kind of pick his mind about how that journey had been for him, and if he thought that decision had affected his brain and mind more than anything else.
That's an interesting question, but and it presumes that one knows the domain. I'm a domain-specific researcher, and so I think that for instance, in the domain of publishing, there are certain colleagues that I might say, because they've published substantial numbers of papers. For example, there's a colleague of mine, what's his name, David Pearson, in reading, for example. And so in the reading domain, I think he's one of the smartest people, but in the mathematics domain, I'd have to go with somebody else. In the intelligence domain, I think there are, Arthur Jensen was one of the people who actually taught me, and I think a lot of his hypotheses have been supported, some have been overturned. So I really do think it really does depend on domain to get smart.
The smartest person I ever met, well, Jensen was one of them. I would have a tough time saying the smartest person. Let me think about that. Get back to me here.
Why was Jensen on that?
Well, because he had a tremendous range of not just knowledge, but his mathematical ability, his skills in analysis, and just data and statistics and things like this that are absolutely essential for what this conference is all about. And it is analyzing data. And he was superb at it.
Do you have any anecdotes about him?
Yes, I do. He was a clarinet. He was a musician, a clarinet player, and he initially strove to be another Benny Goodman, but he realized early that wasn't going to happen. So he went into another field and did it pretty well.
There was a Chinese shopkeeper in Borneo who had been to second grade, but could discuss everything about the modern world. But so I've always thought of him as a very, very smart person. even though very uneducated, but very, very smart. But in more traditional measures of smartness, probably Harold Urey, the chemist who I knew as a kid, and I knew a number of very smart people as a child. They were found in the University of California, San Diego, and they were recruiting Nobel Prize winners, and these guys were fun to talk to.
Could you tell us about Harold, who he is for people?
What?
Could you tell us about Harold for people who don't?
Harold Urey won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for I can't quite tell you what he did, but one of the things he was interested in is can you make life in a test tube? So he was looking at what the basic chemistry of creating from very simple molecules create organic molecules. And he was working on this in the 30s. But the characteristic of Urey and a bunch of those people was curiosity and interest in all kinds of things. And that was, another very smart person there that I knew very casually as a child was Johnny von Neumann, who was very, very smart. I didn't know him as well as I knew Urey. But von Neumann, as we know, could do anything. And everyone is so impressed with what he could do in terms of, although I tell a story about Johnny von Neumann, he counted on his fingers, powers of 10. But, and he also had the ability to analyze almost any problem really rapidly and come up with creative solutions. And Urey was like that too. He was a chemist, but he was interested in the broader issues of where does life come from? And how does it relate to oceanography? The founding of UC San Diego was based on recruiting people like Urey. But going back to my Chinese shopkeeper friend, I've always thought of him as one of the smartest people I've ever met because he had no formal education other than second grade. And he was fluent in multiple Chinese languages, as you'd expect from a Chinese man, but also in the local language, Iban, or also another language, Milano, and also English. And my wife and I talked to him almost every day for 2 years. And I just really found the man was very, very able to come up with solve problems, but not in the traditional PhD type issues, but given the disparity between his education, which was almost zip, and what he could do, I just found he was extraordinarily smart.
To see part 2, go to aporiamagazine.com and sign up to our mailing list. Aporia is a social science, philosophy and culture magazine trying to widen the Overton window. Thank you for watching, and thank you to our interviewees for sharing their wonderful stories.